When we say that someone has an eye for photos, what we really are saying is that they have good taste. Well, taste could probably be a rather broad word in this context, but at least visual taste, in a sense that they know what looks good in a photo and what does not. And they also know how and where to find that goodness. So if you want to refine your photographic eye, then you will really need to refine your sense of beauty, aka what looks good to you. And this is exactly what we're gonna go into today in this video. Firstly, what kinds of arrangements look more flattering to the human eye than the others? And secondly, how do you go about finding out these arrangements and how do you actually incorporate that into your own work? So throughout this video, to help you visualize things a little bit better, I will be scattering a few examples here and there that you could work on in front of your screen by yourself first, and then I will go on to share my perspective as well on those pieces of artworks. Quick shout to Terry, thank you for asking this question on the photographic eye earlier on this channel, which is what inspired this video today. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So let us begin by studying what makes a photo look nice to the human eye. And this is my theory. Central to the perception of beauty is the idea of visual weight. Composition, which is something that we talk about quite a lot, is basically the art of assembling the different elements inside of the frame, trying to distribute the weights so that the entire image looks visually balanced. Let us borrow some principles of design that we could easily transfer back to photography. Alright, so first off, we have lines. So they generate a sense of direction and continuity inside of a frame. If we look at it in the context of images, by the way, I'm demonstrating with Henri's works. He is the perfect embodiment of classical composition that has a really heavy emphasis on geometry and shapes. Now, do you see how the lines are playing out here? Feel free to challenge me, but this is how I see it. I think the lady's torso on the upper right is generating a series of curves, both straight and diagonal, that results in a smooth, flattering line, especially those implied by the lady's legs. Next up, we have scale, which consists of two similar objects but of an apparently different size, and a balance is achieved when the brain understands the relationship between the two. So back to Henri's work, this one features two men who are dressed really similarly, the one lying in front taking up way more space than the one lying further away. So here is how I see balance being achieved. The heads of the two men were implying a line on the left, another line is being implied by the gentleman's feet, and finally the lying posture closes up the base of the triangle. In addition, the smaller guy's body also implies an extra slanted line. Next up, we have division, where the frame is somewhat divided into chunks that take up approximately equal areas in the frame. These chunks are oftentimes not identical in shape, but their placement in respective parts of the frame somehow balances themselves out. So take a look at this. It's yet another image from Henri. If you like Henri's work so far, check out for more on Magnum's website. Alright, so here is my take. The way I see this is that the blocks of walls, the actual walls, acted like chunks that were spread across the frame, and on the other hand, their shadows also acted as another series of chunks. Now, I'm not being very exact here. The idea is that the shapes are slightly different, but they fill up the frame in a way that creates a rhythm. There's repetition, where we see one element, either a shape or a line. It keeps on appearing at an approximately equal distance from one another, thus resulting in a balanced visual effect when viewed as a collective. Again, here is another classic image by Henri. Take some time to work it out in your head. Usually with Henri's images, there are more than one thing happening simultaneously because he's just so skilled. But here, in relation to repetition, this is what I think. The lines stretching across the frame horizontally is a repeating motif. They are close to being parallel to one another, and I do think you can also make a case for them being rather equally spaced from one another. Next up, we are looking at tension, where the emphasis is placed on the singular item that's separated from a group, usually a group consisting of its own type. This singular item would appear to carry as much weight as a group combined. Isn't it fascinating how there is a Bresson shot for so many of these design principles? And by the way, don't be too serious about how these are named after. You can call them whatever works best for you. It's really the ideas behind that matters. Alright, I think that in this image, the balance is achieved between the crowd taking up the upper half of the frame and the one man lying on the lower half of the frame. These are all formally dressed men, and there are many of them sitting side by side forming a group in which none of them stands out from one another. But then there is this man lying down there alone, and he is accorded much more weight because he was singled out, although he too is dressed in like manner. Next up we have radial, in which the lines spiral outwards from a source, potentially reaching across to the edges of the frame. This is purely guesswork, but I am pretty sure that when Henri took these, he wasn't thinking about these things. But it certainly is in his subconsciousness given his formal training in classical arts. Now in this example, based on what I understand it to be, the source appears to be someone giving out something on the right. The strings and the hands extending towards it completed the lines that are arranged in a spiral. So this is essentially the skeleton, if you will, of the image which balances things out. That has been quite a few examples that I've gone through with you, but really there are just so many more other things that you could actually make these principles an integral part of your own photographic eye. Next up, this is why I would suggest that everyone keep your contact sheets and actually take the time to study them. Now, what is a contact sheet, you might ask? A contact sheet is simply a tabulation of all the raw images that you've shot, arranged in a chronological order. I don't actually keep every single one of my raw files that I've ever created. I do delete files, just to be clear. But what I really mean is that I will keep all the shots that were leading up to that one shot that I picked, and also a couple of the shots that followed the one shot that I picked. So in total, I would have say 10 files in my contact sheet for every image that I chose. And the contact sheet is very important for a very good reason, because it represents your thought process. Now, if you think about it, in the very first place, there must have been something in the scene that caused you to want to pick up your camera and take that first shot. And then there would be some other thing that happened in the scene that caused you to pivot and move away, make changes in relation to that very first composition that you had. This will happen for the third and the fourth, and for every subsequent shot that was different from the last. And eventually, when it comes to selecting your final shot out of the bunch, again, there would be something that causes you to, decide on that as opposed to the rest of the images which were very similar. So the point here is to identify what that something is for you. And the most straightforward way to do this is to look through your contact sheets, look through all the images that came before and after, and find out how the elements inside of the frame were aligned differently. Notice those subtle differences and think about how they make your images look more or less balanced to your own eyes. At this point, I cannot stress enough how important it is to start from your own contact sheets. As we will see later, there is of course also value in studying other people's works and other people's contact sheets. It's so important that Magnum Photos even published an entire book on contact sheets called the Magnum Contact Sheets, if you're interested for that matter. But the reason why it has to always start from your own work is because people are interested in seeing you. They want to see how you see. They're interested ultimately in how your photographic eye plays out in real life, and that pretty much sums up what we look for in a great photographer, right? So definitely it's gonna be way worth your while to actually study your own contact sheets, because that would hone your very own photographic eye that belongs to no one but you. This next tip I have for you is to develop the habit of pausing and thinking about every photo that you see. You can do it simply as a mental exercise, or you can take it one step further by actually noting it down with pen and paper. The essence of it is to actually formulate your own conclusion on a photo as to whether or not you like it. It's as simple as that. So if you like it, why do you like it? And if it doesn't work for you, why does it not? It could be in relation to a bad sense of balance, as we've discussed in relation to visual weight. Or it could be the emotion. It could be anything, but the point here really is to formulate a concrete conclusion as to firstly whether or not it works for you, and second of all, why. Photography is a rather sophisticated form of art that isn't always meant to be analyzed, and that is just not how you generally go about appreciating art. However, we are talking about a visual exercise here. So speaking from the perspective of doing an exercise, ideally you should be able to extract exactly what is working for you in that image. It gives you some sort of pointers as to what kind of direction you could potentially take with the photography. Based on my experience, I would say that developing your photographic eye is half-half. It's half intuition and there is another half that, involves deliberate work. And here we really are trying to address the half where deliberate work has to go into. Let us now turn to some examples, starting with this image by Elliot Erwitt. Now think for yourself. Do you like it? Why and why not? Personally, I like this image a lot, apparently because I chose it. Now specifically, I like the juxtaposition going on with the woman looking at the dress portrait and the men looking at the nude. Next up, we have an image by Richard Kalvar. I like this image for the imperfect symmetry. I can't stop staring at this glass on the lower edge, which broke the symmetry. And next, here is an image by Josef Koudelka. I especially liked how the shapes were crooked, and it somewhat reminds me of the Nazi logo. Here we have an image by Hiroji Kobota. I can't stop imagining lines coming out of the faces, if you will, forming this sense of direction and also the texture on the boards. And here we have an image by Parr. I loved how the shape of the people roughly resembled a river on its own and how dynamic this image looks. Developing a photographic eye and really just learning to see are very interesting topics within photography that deserves way more attention, and these are just 3 of the many points that I think would be the most suitable for a video format. So definitely let me know what are your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye! You can do it as a mental exercise, or if you like, you can actually take it a step further by writing it down with pen and pencil. Pen and pencil?